Today, a live edition of Future Forward.
As event organizers reorganize around a virtual world, we'll dig in and share what we've learned.
New platforms, new formats, and a new way to go to work as COVID-19 drives a work from home world.
I'm Alexis Scordato.
And I am Stephen Rosenbaum. Let us launch. All right, so live is weird. We've done live to tape in the past, but this is now theoretically live, and we're using a bunch of different platforms. So please don't blame
And
us.
very apropos
Yeah.
for the times we live in.
So you found this fabulous article from CMX Hub, which I think is probably the core of what we're going to talk about. A comprehensive list of tips, tools, examples for event organizers during the COVID outbreak, and we'll obviously put that link in the show notes. But just start by telling us, the CMX folks, right?
Yeah, so David Spinks, who co-founded CMX, he's a good industry colleague and friend, and he's been doing the community thing for better part of a decade, if not more. And he's just a good go-to resource because he brings together community professionals, marketers, support folks, enterprise community professionals. It's basically anyone who has community in their title on LinkedIn is probably connected to CMX somehow.
So, so just for our listeners, um, both Alexa and I had big events scheduled for last week that we, for different reasons, but almost at about the same time, kind of in a parallel universe, moved to virtual. You've had more experience with, distributed teams, but even for you, you said that like the idea of doing a quarterly meeting entirely virtual like required some rethinking. So talk a little bit about your quarterly planning meeting, and then I'll talk about the combine and how that worked.
Yeah, so we were supposed to do our Q2 roadmap planning. We were going to have like engine. And so it was interesting because we normally do remote work every day, but there was something really special about doing our planning in person. One, you look forward to it because these are colleagues who you're normally seeing on a screen. And so um, it is a nice opportunity to connect in person. And then second is that, when you do things, some planning sessions, like you rely on a whiteboard, you have like sticky notes, post-it notes, it's a little bit more interactive. And so it was interesting as facilitators, to think about how to actually go from in person into a virtual breakout session.
And you used a tool that I've since started playing with a little bit since you told me about it, Mural.
Yeah, so Mural is cool because I mean I'm not a power user by any means. My colleague Keith in California sort of introduced it to the organization, but you can kind of set it up like a virtual like whiteboard space, and it has some voting features. Folks can kind of like add post-it notes. So for example, one of the exercises you could do is say like, hey, here are four themes for new products. So we product features we could develop, and then everyone can kind of claim a color post-it note and then place it in the different quadrants, and you could say, okay, we're going to do this for 10 minutes, and then everyone afterwards we can like share what they're seeing on the mural. It's cool.
So I'll tell you our story. So the NYC Media Lab runs a startup accelerator program that is called the Combine, and the Combine is on its way to its big demo day. We're about 3 weeks out, and we made the decision. So we're based at NYU, and NYU is our home, and so we were following NYU's kind of guidance. And initially they said, we're going to we're evaluating things, and almost as quickly, I think even before NYU made the decision to close campus, we were like, you know what, we think that this would be better. We know we're going to be virtual within a week or two. Let's get at it sooner so that we can make mistakes together and learn from it. And so we took our entire cohort, which is 7 companies, almost 20 people, 2 instructors, and 3 guests. we moved them all into a virtual. We sent out emails and said we're moving to virtual. We then invited everyone to a Zoom conference, and we only made two kind of standing rules before people arrived. One was, in addition to your name, please put a dash and the name of your company next to your name, because we knew that even though we all know each other, our guests who comment on the presentations wouldn't know all these faces, and so we wanted to have the labeling that be easy for them to feel welcome. And then the other thing that we said was no lurkers. Like, if you're going to show up, you got to have your camera on. You got to be in the conversation. And you told me that there's a phrase for that. No, a digital ed phrase. Yeah.
Yeah, to you, the company I used to work at, so they specialize in helping schools go online. And so they actually trademarked the phrase no back row.
Yeah.
Right? There's no such thing as a back row when everyone's faces are on the screen.
I'm gonna be honest. I was trepidatious about the move to digital for a couple of reasons. I wasn't sure. I mean, people were dealing with their personal life. The students, some of the housing was closing. Students, I thought, given the intense nature of the program, that some of our classmates would say, "Look, I can't make a virtual session." In fact, everyone showed up. Everyone was on time. Everyone was plugged in. Everyone had tested their internet connections, tested their mics, and it was a 3 hour session, and it went extraordinarily well. I came away feeling, I mean, like you, I missed the in person part, uh, but in some ways, I think it made people more engaged.
So the thing that we gain for sure is that the scrambling, like for a breakout session, for each group to like go find their own corner of the office, and then as a facilitator to tell everyone, hey, like wrap up in 2 minutes, like come back. I mean, it it shaves off time, like precious time when you have a tight schedule. And so it was interesting because in a virtual session, I actually used the Zoom functionality to do breakouts. And I could actually just with a click of a button, just get everyone out and then get everyone back in. It was actually pretty cool.
So the only thing, a couple of learnings from our first week moving a class to virtual. One is some people are more conscious of the quality of their video than others, and so there were people who were like sitting at the bottom of the screen or were sitting in front of a window, and so we said to them, hey, listen, if you were doing this in person, you wouldn't wake up in the morning and not comb your hair and not not put on your best shirt and jacket or whatever. Like this is your chance to present yourself visually on web. Make sure that you've got good lighting and a good set, and everyone seemed to get that. The only other thing was, I mean, there was a little bit of issue with audio, but Zoom turned out to be surprisingly gettable. The one thing I think we may try for next week is to have one person host the gathering and run the tech in the back end while the two co-teachers can be fully engaged in the reading the chat and engaging in it, because I think running the technology at the same time that you're leading the conversation is probably something gets lost in that, and there isn't really even a
Yeah,
name
we
for
actually
it.
have an app.
Hmm?
We have a glitch app. I'll send the link, but every remote meeting usually has three roles. There's the meeting like facilitator, like the organizer or the MC. Two is the timekeeper, and then the third role is the note taker. But maybe there should be a fourth, which is the tech IT person, but usually the facilitator can do that. But yeah, it's a good remote best practice because you can actually do four of those things well
No.
as one person.
And I always feel bad, even occasionally when we're doing this podcast and we also have a video feed, like I'll get distracted with what's on the screen and then I won't. Anyway, so let's move on to the CMX list, and we'll begin with item number one: uh, tips for canceling and rescheduling events.
Yeah, so my friend David Spanks, who co-founded CMX, which is a community of community professionals. I mean, he's been working in the community space for probably a decade now, if not more. And so I always turn to him as just having a pulse on the tools that professionals use, big and small.
So it's on the screen for those of you who are watching this on video, but for our podcast audience, we'll read a little bit. Um, so, you know, we'll go through. And some of these you may disagree with as a listener or as a co-host. I mean, so the number one, tips for canceling or rescheduling conferences or events. And you know, basically what this says is if you've got an event coming up in the next couple of months, it's a good chance you'll need to cancel. Even the strongest holdouts like South by Southwest were forced to cancel in the week before their big events.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, I was running 2 events at South by this year. I made a decision not to email my contacts at South by because I knew that they were struggling to make a decision, and I felt like they didn't need my input, honestly. And if
Yep.
they canceled, then we would cancel, and if they had said go forward, I would have asked my panelists to try and go forward. Um, they did cancel, and they canceled after the city of Austin essentially told them that it was too large a gathering, um, which was later than I think some people expected.
Absolutely. I was surprised in the weeks leading up to the cancellation. I think we talked about it. You
Yeah.
know, he said, wow, Google pulled out, all of the major tech companies canceled their developer conferences. I felt like it was only a matter of time.
So I'm just going to blow through these and then we'll talk about them. They're saying, you know, here's some things to think about: credits versus refunds, reviewing your insurance options, reviewing vendor, venue, and sponsor contracts in terms of what commitments you've made that you can't get out of. Um, then they say be a leader, over communicate, and I think we'll talk about that for sure. And defer to your volunteers, which I think is interesting. Stay cool, don't unnecessarily I don't know how to pronounce that word. Exacerbate. Yeah, yeah, fear, and then connect with local authorities, and manage cash flows. Pay vendors invoices as late as is reasonable. Um, so, a lot of stuff canceled. Um, my experience, I had 2 big conferences coming up. Um, they both handled it differently. Um, the list is hotels, airfare, and then conference fees, right? You know, what do you think of this no refunds under any condition policy?
Oh, I mean, I'm conflicted because they're in the business of events, and so issuing refunds and making that possible potentially really uh, risks the entire operation.
I just thought about startups I've run where, you know, every 2 weeks you had one of those sit down with the CFO and talk about payroll meetings.
Right.
And, you know, you'd like to think that an organization that's as mature as any of these larger conferences has some cushion. But, you know, back of the envelope, you can imagine what if you had to refund, if you had to take the losses of all the commitments you made and pay all those bills and then refund all of the ticket sales, you know, back of the envelope, it seems to me like it's millions and millions of dollars. Um,
Right.
so the
Yeah, so
question is
South
not,
by's case, they are not issuing refunds, but you can defer to South by 2021, 22, 23, and they're extending 50% walk-up rate to individuals.
yeah. So I'll just give you, in our case, we had a big event coming up that was going to have an audience. It was a month away. We were early, the Media Lab, in moving things to virtual, but despite that, the venue that we contracted essentially said, you're walking away from your deposit, and
Hmm.
we'll take the other half and we'll defer it to next year. But, you know, for an educational institution, it's not an insignificant amount of money. Um,
Yeah, I mean, there's so many people impacted by all of this, right? It's the producers of the event, the venues, vendors, and then the staff, right? The staff of both the event and also the venue. And I mean, if you look at the NBA, right, canceling canceling all of the games, canceling the NCAA tournament. I mean, it's and I don't think we're gonna feel, even though the market tanked last week, I don't think we're gonna feel the effect of this on the economy until 6 months from now when you look at what the sort of Q2 earnings are.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. And so we'll talk a little bit about our event. And so we made the decision. This is a demo day event, and demo day is the culmination of 12 weeks of extraordinary hard work. And I've been both in the management side of a demo day, and I've been on stage for a demo day, and it's hard to explain to someone who hasn't done it the the excitement, fear, trepidation of, are you dressed right? How are you holding the microphone? Where's the screen going to be? Is there going to be a confidence monitor in front of you? Working in front of an audience tends to just increase the the excitement and the anticipation of a presenter. So we're now moving the demo day to entirely virtual.
Yep.
And so one of the things that I said to the team on Friday is, physically, when you think about I've never been a professional performer. Well, I was a magician once, but not that. But when you think about singers, it's all about the diaphragm, right? It's about how you hold yourself. It's about how you. So all of a sudden, this stage presence that you imagined you're going to be is now replaced by sitting in a chair in front of a computer screen. It's
Yep.
very different, and
Totally.
and I think, I mean, Stephen Colbert did Thursday Night last week without a studio audience, um, and it felt weird. Like, he's
Hmm.
used to that energy. He's used to feeding off the crowd and making a joke and having people laugh, and being able to make a little, like when you take a performer and you don't have an audience, things change. So we're going to spend a lot of the next 3 weeks coaching our teams on how to push through in a virtual environment where they're in a little video box as opposed to being on a stage.
Hmm.
But that's going to be a big experiment for us.
You know what you should do is you should give them one of the tips you gave me when we started doing this podcast, which is to get a light. So
Yeah,
I've been on calls where someone's like working in a closet or like in a hallway because, they're in a tiny studio apartment and they're jockeying for space with their spouse and they're not by a window or they're not by their lamp, and having one of these little ring
yeah.
lights is super handy on a call. I mean, it can make all the difference between someone, looking like they're lurking in the shadows to just being very present and there.
It's funny. I said this to the cohort on Friday. I said, you know, if you're like this on the screen, if you're like I'm, it's funny because I mean I'm a video guy my whole career and I'm a performer, so I'm used to thinking about how people, you know,
Lighting,
I mean,
sound,
the first thing I
everything.
did was put a Media Lab logo on my wall because this is my office now.
Yep.
Um, but yes, everyone should get a light. That's a good point, and I should remember which one you have because I think I like yours better than mine. I think yours has a little bit warmer. I, the one with the ring. I have to figure out which one it was. All right, so let's move on to section two, tips on running virtual events. Um, uh, you you'd done this before, right? So this wasn't like the whole whiteboarding virtual thing. Like, you weren't like, oh my god, I have to learn this by Tuesday.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still, so we used a tool called Mural. And if you go to their website, mural.co, you can kind of see what it is. I'm not a power user by any means because it's not the type of meeting that I facilitate all of the time. But yeah, I mean, I- I'd say that I am lucky because uh, I work online and I use a lot of software and I help build and design software. So even if something is not obvious to me, I can usually figure it out on the fly. But yeah, I mean, the tips for running a virtual event, just going down this list, teach the technicals. One of the pieces of feedback I got from one of our attendees was they would have loved having like a prep session, like a mural and Zoom 101 before we just went straight into it because they did not feel as fluent and comfortable. And so it was almost like the exercise was going and they were still like fumbling to figure out like, wait, what panel do you look at? Where are we clicking? Like where's the thing?
Yeah.
Plan, prep, and practice. I don't think there are many individuals who have the luxury of doing this, but at the same time, if you are going to be presenting virtually, if you are going to be a facilitator, just at least have the fluency in the material you're going to present. You know, if presenter mode is something that you're not comfortable with because you want to see faces on the screen instead of your slides, great. Can you circulate the link to your slides and basically guide everyone through the content? Decide if you'll offer recorded content. So I think that this is one of the best things that remote and distributed teams can do. Record your sessions because, like especially now in this context, there are folks who are like scrambling to pick up their kids from school, who are running out to the grocery store at, 3 p.m. because Trader Joe's is basically not stocked. And so it's great. It's a great way to combat time zones, and it's a great way to keep stakeholders in the know if they can't be there live. So recording is your friend. Setting ground rules. I think this is really important. There's sort of no right. I don't think there's a right or wrong. It's sort of just the tone that you want to set. So for example, if you're in a Zoom room, right, is it required that everyone has their video on, right? And I would say that yeah, if that is something that works for your team and your organization, cool, because it means that everyone can see each other and you can kind of read body language and you can see faces and that's great and you can see expressions. But you also have to recognize that in an international context, bandwidth is sometimes a scarcity. And so if you are sort of in a low bandwidth area, or you're just, I don't know, your power went out, right? Is it acceptable that someone can actually just dial in, right? But making sure that you account for those cases, and as a facilitator, say what's acceptable, or if you are okay in sort of that group dynamic, just like calling it out, saying like, hey folks, like so sorry, I'm gonna, like I did this actually last week. I said, hey folks, I'm here, I'm present, I'm totally engaged, but it's 4 o'clock and I actually haven't fed myself yet. So my camera is off for the first 10 minutes while I like woof down this sandwich. Right.
Yes.
And it's just like, you kind of just have to like set those rules. Um, and then you create a dedicated networking space. So what does that mean? It's like where do people talk while you're in a group setting virtually? Are you Slacking in the background? Are you emailing notes? Is there a Google Doc? Are you using the built-in chat function? There's so many ways to configure it. And so I think this is a whole new world of work for many, many people. But this is something that I'm like excited about. And so even though it's under unfortunate circumstances, I am actually really jazzed that uh, lots of people are actually giving this remote thing a try.
Well, I don't think anyone has a choice, and B, yeah, I mean, I guess it's making lemonade from lemons. Fair enough. All right. Um, by the way, theoretically, Crowdcast has gone to session two. I'm not quite sure what that means exactly. It says session one of two, but I can't tell. So we may have lost our Crowdcast audience, but I think we still have our streaming audience, I think. All right.
Learning as we go.
Yeah. Tools for virtual events and community. So there's lots of them. So I've never heard of Hopin before, never heard of AirMeet before, never heard of Run the World before, Remo. I mean, TO, Toasty plus Zoom, Toasty, Icebreaker, and then there's a whole bunch more. Crowdcast, Six Connects, goes on and on. So we've both used Zoom, we've both used Google Hangouts, and Crowdcast we're experimenting with. Although it's a little, I'm using OBS, which we use every week to feed Crowdcast, so it's a little unclear whether people are seeing us in Facebook or YouTube, or whether they're seeing us on Crowdcast. But
Or are they seeing us at all? We don't
or
know.
yeah, or are they seeing us at all? We had one login so far that when I looked. Um, anything? I mean, first, I guess is Zoom. So it's funny. Zoom seems to be the one people talk about significantly more than, for example, Google Hangouts.
Yeah, if I see a Google Hangout link for a group call, I actually ask the organizer if we can switch to a Zoom link. I find the video quality to be better, and then the fact that you have that built-in record feature really helps.
So the only thing that's hard about Google Hangouts is that Google Calendar seems to default to Google Hangouts.
But there is a great Zoom plugin that you can install, and as a Google Calendar uh, sender, you can just change your the meeting to be Zoom by default.
I installed the plugin yesterday, but I couldn't
Hmm.
figure out what it did. And then I tried to schedule a calendar meeting and it offered up a Zoom call. And I was like, oh, that's great.
There you
So
go.
good for them. Um,
Yeah.
anything, so the only difference between OBS and as a platform is it does feel more like a like a broadcast tool. I mean,
Hmm.
you can do more scenes, you can cut between different. It gives you a chance to kind of switch up. So here, this is the scene we have up with the that has um, the web browser to the side, and then this is the one with us side by side. And right now it's set up as a cut, but I could just as easily make it a swipe. Um, Although it doesn't seem to be. Oh, because it's not in studio mode. Here we go. Um, maybe. Yeah, here. Never mind. Too confusing. And I want to get back to the show anyway. Any anything else about platforms? Anything else that people should be looking at?
I think Slido is interesting. I use Slido too because for our virtual Monday all hands, like at the company, it allows participants to ask questions, and you can enable it anonymously or not. And so it's cool because it basically you can, as a participant, you can ask questions, and then you can also vote up questions.
What does it cost? I
Mm,
haven't. I've never seen. I mean, I have. I've seen it at South by Southwest.
I actually am not sure.
All right, we should look at that. Um, all right. Um, Number four, examples of great virtual events. Um, I did not know Collision was virtual.
It's not. I think it's just virtual now.
So, well, maybe, but what this says is, luckily, many companies have paved the way, and you can learn from their examples. Here are some of the best examples of virtual conferences and events.
Huh. Maybe because I know Collision was in New Orleans and then it switched to Canada.
Right? It
Like
says
a while ago.
move to online conference, Collision from home. All right,
Hmm.
we'll have to look at that. Um,
Okay. Oh, Slido, by the way, there is a free version, but it limits 3 polls per event. So, and then it goes up from there.
to $24 or $500.
$199.
Ouch.
Yeah. But you can do it like again, if you're using it internally, and again, it's just about say you want to poll your class, like or you want your like during demo day, right? If you have like a string of presenters and you don't have time for Q&A or you have to limit it, then it's really good because then it can just log all of the questions and then you can get to them at the end.
Hmm. All right, cool. So we're just about out of time. Hopefully, people found this useful. Um, the last thing I want to talk about is this conference that BOMA is running. So which browser are we? Let's go over here. Um, so um, this is an event that is, I think, important for our listeners. It's the COVID-19 Global Summit. It's happening a week from today. Um, Zoom is actually a partner helping them run it. It's 2-hour sessions dealing with COVID. Starts in Brazil and then it moves to Canada, China, France, India, Japan, New Zealand, Poland, Portugal, and finally ends in the US. Um, it's an extraordinarily well curated, thoughtful gathering. Laura Stein, who is the founder of TEDx, is the organizer, and she knows how to do big global events. I think, among other things, I don't want to hear about how the U.S. is handling or mishandling COVID-19. I would rather hear about how the world is handling it differently, and I would like to come away from it, with learnings not just from one market. So
Right.
it's free. Everyone's a volunteer. If you're a listener to the pod and you want to get involved, reach out to us and we'll connect you up. But it's definitely, I think, going to be an important global event run by really good people. So highly recommend. And with that, another half hour has come to a close.
Wash your hands.
Yes,
Stay safe. Don't
don't
go out.
don't touch your face.
Well, I washed my hands before this, but yes, don't do this.
All right, don't hear. And we'll be back next week. See you then.
All right. See ya.
See ya.